I'm Christopher Lee. Join me for 100 years of horror.
I have ways.
Like Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff rose to prominence with a fantasy film made in 1931. But he was never typecast the way Lugosi was with Dracula. Boris remained thankful to his friend, the monster, all his life. If someone would have told me that not only would I work with Boris Karloff, but become his friend and next-door neighbor, I wouldn't have believed them for a moment. But Boris made the unbelievable believable.
And every year, at Christmas time, they did a sort of a pantomime for 2 nights, and I played the Demon King in Cinderella.
And what was the play you made your professional debut in, Boris?
By golly, that was prophetic, too. That was The Devil by Franz Bollner.
At the ripe old age of 21, I think, he ran away from home and went to Canada, where he did most anything necessary to sustain himself. He arrived, I think, with very, very little money in his pocket and essentially no trade training at all, and certainly no theater experience. But he was smart enough and determined enough that he lied his way into several parts, but mainly he dug ditches and drove trucks and did whatever it took to stick to his craft.
He never forgot this lean period. Decades later, he endowed a small theatre with enough money to keep their doors open and train newcomers.
And from the very beginning, Boris became part of the group. Not a star, mind you, Ralph, but just one of us. And when he found out that we were trying to raise the funds, I'm going to tell it because it needs to be told. When he discovered we were trying to raise the funds to build our own theater, he turned over every penny of his percentage of the profits to our building fund.
His break was with the Criminal Code, really. He first was in the play and then he was cast in the film, and because of that, he was then considered for the part of the monster after Bela Lugosi turned it down.
After Lugosi and director Robert Florey were dropped from the proposed film of Frankenstein, British director and artist James Whale got the assignment. With the combined talents of Karloff and Pierce, Universal attempted to create a new Man of 1,000 Faces.
Boris, I have little remembrance for the monster that you have portrayed. And I think this will remember the days we worked day and night to create it.
Tell them what it is.
Right on the neck.
That's a little electric lot to connect electricity.
I used to call it the Alamite.
Alamite.
Well, and Boris had to work in that heavy outfit all day, every day for, how many weeks? Jack?
18 weeks.
18 weeks, that's right.
And Boris, remember when you came out to my place at Encino, and we work outside in the yard to make the makeup.
Yeah.
And then from there we went to Malibu Beach.
That's
3 o'clock
right.
in the morning, I
3
think.
o'clock in the morning,
Yeah,
that's right.
That's
And then
right.
we made the makeup, and we went out to location, and after that, he came back to the studio,
and worked all that night.
all that night, and Carrie, Colin Clive, and you back, with the
remember
bloodhounds chasing you.
I remember it.
What a stamina.
Sax Rohmer's Asian mastermind came to life in a grand MGM production with an emphasis on sexuality, racism, and torture. Strong stuff for 1932. Alas, Universal did not loan out Jack Pierce to create the Chinese makeup. Throughout the 1930s and 40s, the single name Karloff signified mystery and terror the same way Garbo represented allure. Audiences turned out in droves to experience the latest variation on a recurring theme.
Imagine a baron of an old castle. A baron who fascinates women with an almost hypnotic attraction. He loves them violently, and then he murders.
I don't mean to frighten you, Tim, but Gregor's a monster. Don't you feel it?
Every time he comes in.
I must ask you to do one thing. Never allow yourself to be alone with him for a minute. Will you promise me that?
Of course, Dad.
Ask him what became of my sister.
Your sister?
Yes, and the other woman.
Take him away.
When I was in my early teens, I formed a club called the Shutter Club, and with a little group of friends in my neighborhood. And the first magazine I published when I was about 14 was called the Shutter Magazine, and it was all related to the love of movies and radio shows and books about horror and mystery. And Boris Karloff was my favorite actor when I was a kid.
You forget. What I create, I can destroy.
How much will you take to teach Carl to operate this thing?
I will not allow that machine to be used for criminal purposes. Isn't that clear? Sit down.
Tell me when the right-hand dial is on 40.
Give me that.
He was part of the English colony here, and there was quite a sizable one. And they actually had a cricket team, or maybe a couple of teams. Murray Cannell, C. Aubrey Smith, I can't think, there were a number of them. And they used to play cricket in Griffith Park on Sundays. And Karloff was a delightful fellow.
This is the nebula in Andromeda. A ray from this nebula will be caught here and electrically transferred to the projector in my laboratory.
From Andromeda?
750,000 light years distant. I leave my secret with you. It is all there. More power than man has ever possessed. Power to heal, power to destroy.
I think it was a humbling experience for him. He was surprised at the offer and had a great deal of anticipation about it. But of course it was brilliant casting, as he said, since the part had been written for him. And a lot of the joke was lost when it was later made into a film, and he didn't get to play Brewster because he was still under contract for the play. And he was very disappointed at not doing the film.
The only rival between my father and Boris Karloff was the professional competitive rivalry that one has when one competes for a role against someone else. But there was no personal animosity that I ever heard of from my father against Boris Karloff. And as far as I'm concerned, that's just an untrue rumor.
Rest, my dear, gently slipping away into another world, a world of my design.
Wonderful, very retiring, very quiet, and I said, well, he's maybe not very friendly, because after the shot he went to his dressing room, but now, where I'm older than Karloff was at the time when we shot this picture, I know what he did. He concentrated on what he was going to do in front of the camera. At that time, I could go to a burlesque show and come back and do a very serious scene. It didn't make any difference. But now I couldn't do that anymore. I have to be, and I have to think of my dialogue, I have to think of what I'm doing, and that's what undoubtedly Boris did when he didn't partake in the chat and the fun and the laughter, because he knew he had to do, and if you see the picture, you know who carries that picture.
You will be helpless without me. Tonight you give your voice and your will to me.
The close-ups of Karloff's face that Hal Moore shot are Academy Award. I mean, to me, that was the most beautiful thing, this beautiful, this beautiful ugly face, you know, and the lighting from Hal Moore, it carried the picture.
Gray, I must be rid of you. You become a cancer, a malignant, evil cancer, rotting my mind.
You'll never get rid of me, Todd.
Karloff was very keen to do this particular part because he thought this is the story of the part to give him a chance to show people he was really an actor, not just some kind of monster man. Because he had those marvelous duel scenes, with the doctor played by Danielle, and I think Boris held his own very well with Danielle. I think they came off wonderfully well. Some of my favorite scenes in the picture are those kind of contests between the two.
Boris adapted to the fast-paced medium of television easily. Perhaps it was his training in traveling repertory with a new play every week.
Thank you very much indeed. And Carol, I'm delighted that you invited me to be on the show.
Oh, well, I'm glad too, and I think it was very nice of you to fly all the way over from London to do our show.
Oh, not at all. Incidentally, it was one of the most interesting trips I've ever had. The best flight ever.
Oh.
They showed a movie on it.
Oh, really? A lot of the airlines are showing movies now. Was it a good picture?
Oh, no, it was dreadful.
Oh.
One of those monster pictures. I was horrified.
You were horrified?
Well, you see, Hollywood has come up with a whole new, brand new young crop of monsters. And Carol, I was really shocked to see how cheaply those monsters were put together. Well, you know, there's no such thing as a genuine handmade monster anymore.
He, of course, was fearful, I think, of the television industry when he first got into it, but I think he became more and more comfortable with it and recognized it.
Returning to Universal Studios in the 1960s, Boris hosted 2 seasons of Thriller, an atmospheric anthology.
Don't be alarmed. The woman who just screamed is perfectly quiet now. You see, she's been dead for nearly 100 years. Her bed is empty, and whatever it was that frightened her so seems to be gone. Seems to be. But I can tell you this much. That bed won't be empty much longer, and other screams will soon be heard. Whose? Perhaps yours. Boris Karloff, you can bet your bottom dollar that we are holding a profitable hour of strange adventures in trust for you. You might even learn a few unique ways to obtain your second million.
Karloff became a bankable star again, though exclusively in fantasy and horror films.
The committee have decided against holding any further demonstrations.
I tell you, I must have those chemicals.
The bargain's a bargain, eh, Doctor? You keep your end of it, and I'll keep mine.
Mr. Bolton.
I wonder what became of him.
True terror is the soft, cold caress of the raven's wing.
Ooh. Your hands are so cold.
Around this time, Karloff signed to co-star in a handful of horror films for low-budget entrepreneur Roger Corman. He appeared with fellow bogeymen Vincent Price and Peter Lorre in The Raven in 1963.
I offer you a choice. The secret of your hand manipulations, or this against this.
Well, don't just stand there. Do something.
This is no answer.
Very well, then. A duel to the death.
Corman followed up The Raven with another horror-themed joke fest.
Alexander the Great embalmed in honey, so they say.
The Comedy of Terrors, this time adding Basil Rathbone to the proceedings.
He was so, well, he was supposed to play the father, and Boris Karloff was supposed to play that part, and Boris Karloff was too ill at that point, couldn't move very well, so he said, can we switch? And Basil Rathbone did, and I'm delighted that he did. He was older than Karloff, but he was a live wire.
The final film in the Corman-Karloff trilogy was The Terror, which it most certainly was for Boris. This one was shot in a matter of days, and he called upon every bit of stamina Boris could muster.
I suggest you will find better shelter at the village inn.
Thank you, Baron, but I've had my fill of village inns. Surely you wouldn't want to inconvenience a French officer.
You think perhaps he's not merely a traveler?
Why do you say that?
He might have heard things in the village.
Oh, nonsense. He's a soldier. He doesn't listen to old wives' tales. The important thing is that he leave with all due speed.
I shall see to it, sir.
To me, Karloff was, first of all, he was one of the few idols that I had in the business. My mother took me to the movies when I was a kid, 3 years old or something like that, 4 years old maybe at the most. And the first two films I ever recall seeing, and I'm not quite sure of the order, were Frankenstein and King Kong. They weren't even letting adults in, you know, and I knew years later that this was what caused it all. But I'd been a big fan of his. I thought he was one of the, you know, of the 10 greats of the motion picture industry. There was Karloff here, was Chaplin here, you know, Orson Welles, people like that.
Get out of this room.
Karloff donned horror makeup for the last time in 1965 in a version of the H.P. Lovecraft story, The Color Out of Space. Updated, one hesitates to say improved, by blaming everything on atomic radiation. One of Boris's final films was also one of his most memorable. Director Peter Bogdanovich's Targets.
He had a good time doing it. It was, I'm actually sorry it wasn't his last film, because it would have been the perfect last film. But I think it's probably one of his favorite ones, and it certainly is one of my favorite ones that he did. And he had a great admiration for Peter Bogdanovich's work at that time.
Some Mexican producer had arranged a deal with Boris to shoot 4 pictures back to back, which was a totally insane idea. But in Mexico, they do things like that all the time, and he didn't realize what he was getting into. But one of the things that you learn from working with Roger is how to do things like this, to shoot all Boris's scenes in Hollywood and then have the rest of the picture shot in Mexico without Boris being there. So you learn how to write for those problems, you know, when you work for Roger. So I worked that out pretty well, and the whole shooting in Hollywood was kind of a disaster. Boris was wonderful. He had emphysema, and he would be in his wheelchair breathing oxygen, and then he would get up and do his action. I remember one scene, he got up out of his wheelchair and went across and beat somebody with a cane, and then came back and sat down and started breathing his oxygen again. And never shows on the screen. He loved working, and he just really, I remember his exact words. He said he wanted to go out in harness.
You came to witness a sacrifice, so you shall. And you shall witness the dawn of a new age upon the earth, the age of the Baron Samedi. Baron Samedi, your army awaits. Manifest yourself before us now. We are ready for your dominion on earth.
A fraud.
Ah, Baron Samedi, Baron Samedi, Baron Samedi.
I have worked with actors from different generations, and I've liked working with all the different styles, going back to the older actors I worked with, such as Basil Rathbone and Boris Karloff.
Ole, 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 my darling, children have quizzical ways. Ole, 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 my darling, some keep them all of their days.
It was a delight to watch Boris on film, and my privilege to act with him. One of the great joys of my life to consider him my friend. The man who began his stage career at 9 years of age in a pantomime playing the Demon King never lost his childlike love of acting. He was truly the gentlest monster of all.